Panolian publishes community news, the operation of various bodies of local government, a lot of social events, just anything that's going on we try to include on the pages of the Panolian. It was started around 1880. It's been in our family since 1955. The way I see it, it just reflects the community. You could liken it to the soul of a community. My father was an early graduate of the University of Mississippi's journalism program. He went there on the GI Bill after World War II. He worked long hours. Just the mechanical requirements of printing in those days was a time-consuming process, but in return we were all privy to the news of what was going on in the town around our dinner table. It pretty well consumed the family. In 1964, it was a segregated society, segregated by law. I'd lived in this state all my life to that point, and so I'd never seen it differently. People in the white community that would have been considered forward-thinking felt that the system was unfair and unequal and needed to be changed, but it needed to be done slowly and gradually. There were some aspects of society that hadn't changed much for the black population since they had first been freed as slaves. This was 99 years after the end of the Civil War, and the response to that attitude of slow and gradual was, it's now or never, or we've waited long enough. During those times, activities of people in the black community received a little coverage, but not a lot. The summer project had been thoroughly publicized during that time, so we pretty well knew they were coming. It was a big deal. The right to vote was seen as a change agent. It was seen as the catalyst. Black leaders in the community saw that as the key. The state legislature, in its attempt to restrict and intimidate black people from registering to vote, adopted a requirement that applicants' names be published in a legal notice in the newspaper twice. And the idea was to make the public aware of who was registering, so if that person lived on your place or if he worked at your business, you could lean on that person and say, you don't need to do this, or if you do this, I'm going to fire you. It was just handled like any other legal publication. And I don't think that my dad thought that in this county it would be as much of an intimidation factor because you had a core of black landowners, and that made them resilient throughout this time. The summer workers who were here that summer later told me that I also gave them a way to check and see if somebody who had promised they would go down and register actually followed through on it. When the 3 workers were killed in Neshoba County, that was a pivotal event in the state. They were missing for, I forget how many days. I mean, we didn't know what had happened to them. This is an editorial in response to that. The outcome of this conflict is as yet unknown. The intrusion of one group of idealists into the background of another group can only bring trouble. In this light, summer 1964 will indeed be long and hot. He was just expecting trouble. These people promoting these ideas couldn't be here without inevitably clashing with those who felt otherwise. Most of us didn't want to admit to hate, and so there were other rationales. Certainly, I was a racist then. These summer volunteers, these young people who weren't that much older than I, coming here to do this, it was somewhat like a mirror being held up, and we were seeing our reflection, and a lot of us just didn't like what we saw. After I went to work at the paper full-time, that's when I began to meet people who had been the host for the summer workers, and at some point we realized, we're leaving out half of our potential readership if we don't aggressively cover everything that's going on. We began to include more coverage of the black community. There was a point where you just realized black people are enthusiastic readers. The more you cover, the more potential readers you'll attract. So we jumped into that as quickly as we could, and it was well received. This is the first in a series written on the 20th anniversary of the Freedom Summer. I was able to meet some of them and talk to them, and kind of got their view of the community as they remembered it 20 years before. And this is a story about Robert Miles. He was kind of ground zero during that time. Miles recalled that the first 2 COFO workers assigned to Panola County arrived in mid-June. When they got here, nobody wanted them. Well, they were afraid, Ms. Miles explained, as she described initial efforts to spread the workers out among other hosts, all of whom feared some degree of retaliation. Ms. Miles recalled having the only house in town with boarded-up windows during that year. They were shot out so regularly that they couldn't afford to replace the glass. The family abandoned 2 of their homes, 4 bedrooms at night, leaving the 2 on the front of the house vacant for fear of injury from the night rider attacks. You just wanted to distance yourself from it. When we saw ourselves somewhat through their perspective, then we began to rethink some of the attitudes that we had lived with.